The inevitable Ochi stuffed animal might be what finally makes me buy a piece of absurdly overpriced merch from the A24 shop. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. As part of my coverage of the 2025 Sundance Film Festival, today I'm going to be talking about the 2025 fantasy adventure, The Legend of Ochi, which will be seeing a limited theatrical release on April 18th before expanding to a wider release on April 25th. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and even some tailored film recommendations. So be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. The Legend of Ochi stars Helena Zengel, Willem Dafoe, and Emily Watson, and was the directorial debut by Isaiah Saxon. Set on a secluded island inhabited by dangerous nocturnal creatures known as Ochi, it tells the story of a young teenager who defies tradition in order to return an injured baby Ochi home. Although it was initially just a distributor specializing in picking up the types of films nobody else would, A24 has grown into a prominent fixture in the cinematic landscape. Today, everybody knows A24, even people who aren't really film people. A24 still picks up plenty of films for distribution at film festivals, but since 2016, they've also taken to producing a good number of the films they distribute. For a while there, A24 was known for a very specific type of film, artful, psychological movies, a lot of horror and dark dramas. They still distribute plenty of films in that same vein, but over the last 5 to 10 years have expanded quite a bit to basically every type of film. They picked up Marcel the Shell with Shoes On for distribution, which was a bit of a surprise family film success for them in 2022. So it was inevitable that A24 would eventually branch out and try their hand at producing a film for kids and families themselves, in-house. They just needed the right script, and found it in The Legend of Ochi. As a result, Ochi has that A24 feel that fans know all too well, but that's mixed together with a number of other immediately recognizable influences. This film draws upon and emulates family adventure fantasies of the 80s, including many classic Amblin movies, but the distinctive flavor of Studio Ghibli is generously drizzled on there too. Really, Ochi is a mashup of nostalgic styles that help to fill a cinematic void that's been left largely vacant for decades. The dark PG family film. You know, the type of movie that leaves you questioning the PG-ness of it now when you watch it as an adult. It's impossible to talk about The Legend of Ochi without bringing up a dozen of its influences. They're just so embedded into the fabric of this film. That's not necessarily a bad thing, and I'm not mentioning any of these other movies in a directly comparative way. It's more of an easily recognizable descriptive shorthand, and a way to highlight the film's influences. This familiarity yields a number of great elements here, but I first want to start with the not so great. Although far from terrible, the downside of drawing so heavily upon influences is the overly familiar story and fairly weak screenplay. Once you get past the fun but surprisingly thin world building, this film's story and characters are pretty standard adventure fantasy fare. The story of a kid who doesn't feel like they belong, bonding with a misunderstood creature and vowing to get them home safe? I bet you can name at least a dozen movies with that exact plot. There's a certain kind of predictability that comes from stories like this, which may be nostalgically comforting, but the characters here are somehow subpar. This film isn't really able to get you to care about what happens to any of the human characters, lacking characterization and instead relying upon rushed moments of character growth, especially by the end, which feel unearned and unsatisfying. If all this film had to offer was this kind of quirky A24 take on a classic 80s style fantasy adventure, then this would be a nostalgic but ultimately underwhelming experience. Luckily, there's more to it that pushed it towards the positive side, for me at least. I expect that people may end up being fairly divided on this film, but I suspect that nearly everybody will be able to agree on one thing. Ochi is absolutely adorable. This applies to the species overall, but I'm specifically talking about the baby Ochi at the heart of the story. He's never given a name, so I'm just gonna call him Ochi as opposed to the Ochi when referring to the species. To be perfectly honest, I think this movie earns at least an extra half paw, maybe full paw in the rating purely because of Ochi. That's how cute he is. There is some fantastic creature design on display here that, like the movie as a whole, will remind you of a lot of other things from a look, sound, and personality standpoint. There's a bit of E.T. in there, a little Mogwai from Gremlins, some Grogu, and assorted other small, cute Star Wars creatures. Mix that with a monkey lemur hybrid and a Furby, and add a dash of Studio Ghibli adorableness, and you've got yourself a cute and ferocious baby Ochi. He's cute to begin with, but what helps this design immensely, not to mention leads to that instantly nostalgic feeling, is the practical nature of the creature. There are certainly some CGI elements to enhance the visual effects in this film at times, but the vast majority of the Ochi stuff is practical puppeteering or animatronics. This gives it all a very tangible quality, plus adds that endearingly nostalgic movement that can only come from puppets. I mean, there's emulation, and then there's a creature puppet that feels like a prop from some lost Amblin movie from 1986. Speaking of Amblin and nostalgia, we've gotta talk about David Longstreth's score. It truly feels like something straight out of one of those influencing films. It's undeniably John Williams-esque, with a little Amblin family film sound a la E.T., and then some serious Star Wars vibes with some music that would feel right at home on Dagobah. But it's not all Williams, and there's definitely a Ghibli influence there too, plus something all its own. Admittedly, the score is a bit imposing at times, and really drives the audience and how they should feel at any given moment. I imagine this will irritatingly stand out to some people, but I think it actually works here, especially since the screenplay is not really able to get at those emotions on its own. The score is obviously not able to make up entirely for the story's shortcomings or the pacing issues, but it does manage to go a long way in trying. I'm very curious to see how this family film experiment is gonna go for A24. The Legend of Ochi is a cute coming-of-age adventure, but it's also a dark, intense, and often violent movie that's very Willem Dafoe weird at times and darkly Wes Anderson quirky at others. All of this makes me wonder if it'll actually find the younger audience it's aiming for, or if that type of young audience just doesn't exist anymore. This might just tap into Gen X and millennial nostalgia and draw those who grew up with this type of film, getting the added bonus of them dragging their kids along to the theater for baby's first A24 movie. Only time will tell how this experimental gamble works out for A24, but at the very least, they're gonna make an absolute killing off of Ochi merch. Seriously, I cannot oversell how absurdly cute that thing is. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one is definitely the creature design. Ochi is so unbelievably cute, it almost hurts. I realize that something like that shouldn't really drive a film rating, but Ochi alone earns probably a full paw of this film's rating. His adorableness is certainly a big factor here, but the practical nature of his design also plays a large part too. The vast majority of the Ochi stuff in this film uses animatronics or practical puppeteering, harking back to the aesthetic style of this movie's 80s fantasy adventure influences in an extremely nostalgically satisfying way. Along those same lines, the second pro is the score. It's a very prominent and emotion-driven score, perhaps to its slight detriment, but it genuinely feels right for this type of story and this particular film. Much like the other aspects of the movie, the score unmistakably draws upon many influences, perhaps most notably an array of classic 80s John Williams scores from his time working on Amblin films. Some may find the emulation lazy or unnecessary, but it definitely taps into the nostalgia that the film's so deeply rooted in. On the con side, the biggest issue is the screenplay. The story itself is pretty standard fantasy adventure fare, pulling all of its major plot points from any number of similar 80s films. This makes for a predictable story that benefits from a sense of nostalgia, but unfortunately, it just doesn't have the characters or emotional underpinnings to back it all up. The human characters are underwhelming, and either show no characterization or development, or go through extremely rushed character growth at a point obviously deemed most opportune for the script. It's too bad that the endearing heart of this film's 80s influences couldn't translate here. Con number 2 is the pacing. The overfamiliarity of the story certainly contributes to the stagnant nature of this film, but the poor pacing really makes it drag at times. The exposition at the beginning makes for a slow start, but luckily the intrigue of the world building helps carry the film through to Ochi's introduction. From then on, this film rests solidly on the tiny shoulders of that cute little creature. Anytime the story cuts away from him and Yuri, usually focusing on family drama and misunderstandings, it stalls out, requiring an Ochi jumpstart to get moving again. He's more than up for the task, but it does make for a lurching, periodically dull film. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying The Legend of Ochi, or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give The Legend of Ochi 3.5 out of 5 paws. As A24's first foray into family-oriented filmmaking, it successfully channels Amblin family adventures of the 80s with the added inspirational touch of Studio Ghibli. The pacing drags a bit in the middle, and the emotional beats are a tad rushed at the end, but the sweeping score and incredibly cute practically puppeteered Ochi make this film more than worthwhile. I would recommend The Legend of Ochi to anybody looking for a film to fill that dark, almost intense PG void. This really feels like a kid's movie from the 80s, emulating the style and story of many classics. So it's got a great nostalgic feeling, but you should be aware that it's gonna also seem extremely familiar. This movie is being marketed as a family film, and although it might be a bit intense at times for young kids, this might be a good stepping stone film to help get older kids into A24 or sorta weird art house-ish movies. You could kind of look at this as baby's first A24 film. If you liked The Legend of Ochi, I would recommend E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Any number of 80s Amblin family adventure stories could work here, but this film features a very similar kid helping a misunderstood creature get home story, a sweeping score, and an extremely cute practical puppeteered creature. If you liked the Studio Ghibli vibes throughout this film, you should check out Ponyo. Like with the first recommendation, there are quite a few Ghibli films that would fit the bill for various reasons. But this movie features a kid going on a protective, fantastical journey with a unique and very cute creature whom he grows closer and closer to throughout the film. And if you're in the mood for some more coming-of-age nostalgia, you might want to watch The Amazing Panda Adventure. This movie doesn't have the fantasy elements of most of these others here, but it does still feature a kid risking it all to get an incredibly cute creature safely home. This time, a panda cub. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen The Legend of Ochi? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite 80s family fantasy adventure film? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe if you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainely Movies, the way life should be.